Masha al-Khair, good evening. This is going to be an interesting concept here because it's a town hall meeting that is pre-organized almost, but not really. So it's not going to be easy because we had allocated 2 hours for this session, and I think many of you are quite tired. So as sharp as you make it, as concise as you make it, the sooner you will get to the reception. So there's no statements here, honestly. I will just look at you and somebody will get my attention on something, and then I will just give you the floor. So if I don't get to give you the floor, it's because you didn't ask me for it, basically. So what I'd like to do is that we imagine now, I would like you to imagine that you are in a situation room, that you have got to make decisions. There is something called upon you. You have a president, or you have a lady president, or whatever, who is telling you, look, I got to figure this out. What do you want me to do? What is your advice? So whether it, and you have to come to it from your vantage point where your strength is, whether it is as a lawyer, as an investor, as not a lawyer, as a former foreign minister. So I think I would like to, there's one thing that we have not done very well, which is basically to listen to the Iranian voice, because I have a couple of Iranian friends here, and we have not listened much to many of their voices. So I'll start with you and ask you, what are we missing in order to fix it with Iran if we are trying to reconfigure this region and its space in the world? It's a global space. Give me, what do you think we should be doing to make it work with Iran? Say who you are, please, so that it's easier for me to...
By we,
we are in a situation room. We are doing this collectively. We are the globe. We are the world.
Yeah. You are talking on behalf, presumably on behalf of which government?
All right. So here is a think tank. Let me just tell you. Let's not make it complicated. We are a think tank. And as Vitaly knows, this is the sort of thing we all try to do, because you are also part of a think tank. So if we're trying to see what do we have to think about, what do we have to think about to see if it can work? Do you have an idea?
It's a very tough question, and the answer is even tougher. But let me emphasize on one fact as an Iranian, that since I'm in Abu Dhabi, and there are many Arab friends and Arab diplomats who are listening to me, one of the major difficulties that generates animosity and even violence in the region between Iran and Arab people has less to do with politics or the Iranian government, and has to do with the historical, cultural animosity or misunderstanding or confrontation. So I would ask, if I have to give one advice in 1 minute to Arab politicians and Arab diplomats
and Iranians
and Iranians, in order to bring peace into this region, in order to decrease this ugly violence that is going on in the region, we need to remove the cultural barriers between nations. The truth is that Arabs do not know Iranian culture and Iranian society, and Iranians do not know Arab culture and Arab societies very well. We in Iran know Western culture much better than our neighbors' culture. So cultural exchange, cultural mutual understanding is a key for moving forward toward peace and more stability.
Do you think you are you're somebody who is really British, but you come also from a culture that is close by? Tell us what you think. You have a point. You raised the finger. Oh, yes, I'm talking about that.
I was actually going to speak along the same lines of what you're saying. This part of the world, especially the Gulf, are not just comprised of tribes with flags. And I think there's a sort of a cultural relativism in Iran, which I've heard over and over again, which doesn't help in really building mutual respect. and avenues for cooperation in that past. There is a lot of achievements which are on this side of the water, which have to be recognized, and which then perhaps can be the basis of that. In addition, of course, Iran has to stop its behavior in certain places, and Syria is a litmus test in that.
Well, you know what? It's turning into an Iranian corner. So, Karim is also from Iran, although you are living in the United States, you are with Brookings Institution. And then after I listened to you, because I have two distinguished Iraqis, we have not spoken too much on Iraq. So it's turning into a very interesting sort of move from this side to this side. Karim, what is it? Let's talk. What do you think from your point of view should both the governments of, let's say, Russia and the United States, Europeans, what should Iran do to make it work? Not only should Arab countries do. If you want to tackle both, that's fine. But, let's just be more about what does it take? Yeah,
well, let me first commend Raghida for putting this together. She's the only one I know who could bring so many luminaries from different parts of the world in the same place. So I want to give Raghida a round of applause.
Thank you.
She's truly the Fairuz of Arab journalism. There's an anecdote when I used to be based in Tehran, which I really like, which I think captures the interaction between Iranians and Arabs. I was driving to meet a friend of mine, and I was in the back of a taxi. And I looked up at the street sign, and we happened to be on a street called Khalid Islambuli Street. The Egyptians in the room will know Khalid Islambuli was the guy who killed Anwar Sadat. And there's a street in Tehran named after Khalid Islambuli because Anwar Sadat was a friend of the Shah of Iran, and so therefore the Islamic Republic named the street after his assassin. And this is to this day why there's no relations between Egypt and Iran. And so I was curious to get this taxi driver's reaction. I said, do you know who Khalid Islambuli was? And he said, no idea. I said, it's the guy who killed Anwar Sadat. And he became really outraged. And Tehran taxi drivers are bad enough, and he got even more agitated. So I said, okay, take the next right turn. And the next right turn happened to be Bucharest Street, the capital of Romania. And he looked at me angrily then, and he said, who did this bastard Bucharest kill? I think on a popular level in Iran, I think I don't see any inherent animosity towards Arabs. I don't see any inherent animosity towards Sunnis. But I think these are geopolitical battles between governments. Prince Turki and I have spoken about this a lot also from Saudi level. There was a time in the 1970s in which there was a constructive working relationship between Iran and the Arab world. I think the problem is when you have these terrible bloody conflicts in Syria, in Iraq, and Yemen and elsewhere, it exacerbates the Arab-Iran tension. I happen to believe that Iran bears tremendous responsibility for this, and I'm not terribly optimistic that in the near term it can be improved, but I do think once the Iranian government and the nation starts to behave, as Henry Kissinger said, more like a nation state rather than a cause, I think you will start to see an improvement.
When is that going to happen? Give us hope. When?
I think after Ayatollah Khamenei dies, hopefully.
I see. Yeah. I see. That's interesting. That's interesting. Okay, I know a lot of people were commenting on this, but I just really want to talk about Iraq. Iraq is supposed to be a sphere of influence for Iran these days. Is it really falling flatly under the sphere of Iran, or is there really something else that is being that's happening that we really don't know? We're stuck in the past of what the influence of Iran is. I'd like both of you to address that, and I would then come to you, Michael. And
thank you, Raghida. I'm glad now I'm a former speaker and former official, so I can talk a little bit freely about these things. I think that whether it's Iran or the whole Middle East, we have some kind of problem with something called history. History in other part of the world is a unifying factor. In the Middle East, it's a dividing factor. We differ about the history. All the killing that's happening right now is under the name of what happened in the past. Today it is the Hussein and Yazid, as our former PM said, is fight. What's happening today, I think when you look to the Iranians, still the Persian dynasty is in the work. Still they are trying to have their dynasty. Ottoman dynasty, Turks, they are thinking about that. Babylon dynasty, Iraq is always thought about. So this history thing, I think, is affecting tremendously the Middle East. And it's written by people who were ruling at that time. We need to correct our educational system when we teach history. What's happening, Iran is trying to have influence not just in Iraq. Iraq is the first front for Iran to have its influence in Syria, Lebanon, Gulf countries. And as a country, they see their interest to have as much influence as they can. And when they see that the other countries, whether the Arab countries or international countries, they don't care much about what's happening in Iraq, so they extend themselves in Iraq.
Do you want to add a word?
Thank you. I commend you, as Karim did, and the Beirut Institute for bringing us all together. I'm Bakhtiar Amin, former Minister of Human Rights from Iraq. In order not to become a satellite state of this and that nation in this region, we all need to rethink about our relations as nations and religions living in this region. We could become a strong geopolitical, geoeconomic, geostrategic bloc in this region. But unfortunately, we are wasting our resources, both human and natural resources, of wars and conflicts here and there. And unfortunately, we live in a very violent region of the world. We represent over 40% of world's violence today. We represent 47% of world's totalitarian dictatorship in this region. A long list of deficiencies, from 100 million unemployed to 90 million illiterated people, 26 million refugees, IDPs, 30% lives below poverty level. The list is long that I can go on and talk about it. But in order to come out of this proxy war and exhaustion war that we are going through today, we have to extend hands to each other. Arabs, Turks, Kurds, Persians, Christians, Muslim, Sunni, Shia, Yazidi, Druze, Ismaili, Baha'i, etc. And we have to learn from our own history as peoples of this region, and not to repeat the same mistakes and repeat all the time the calamities and the tragedies that we have been through in the past. For the 5,000 years of the history of Mesopotamia, beside the beautiful contribution that we have done to mankind's history, we have lived through bloodshed, unfortunately.
Raghida, maybe later on, if you get the chance, you could tell me what does it take, what is the one, remember you are in a situation room, but now that you are somebody related to human rights, I want to go to someone who is related to human rights. Muhammad Alim, you had an organization that probably is having a good time or a hard time or an easy time in Lebanon on the issue of human rights. You are somebody who is involved in this issue. Is this something that is essential to the reconfiguration of the region and its global space?
Definitely, yes. It's true. I chair the Human Rights Watch Beirut Committee, which happened to be created just late 2010, before everything that has happened in the Arab Spring. What we have witnessed, all of you know it, is really beyond imagination. Without actually understanding the impact of human rights, and even the most fundamental human rights, which are equality, rule of law, everything goes under the same package. We will not be able to evolve towards a better future. atrocities have happened. We need to, after taking realization, we have to work seriously on this. The amount of violence from wars till internal families is just too much. From women's rights to children's rights to total inequality in societies, every single benchmark of human rights have been witnessed and cross most of Arab countries, most, so that we don't generalize, has been witnessed and recorded. This should be one of the major items that we have to focus on through any media, anyway. The challenge would then be, what would be the role of something like the Beirut Institute in promoting? And I think we will have time, maybe a bit later, just to put in some guidelines for our work, your work, everybody's work, towards achieving to reach human rights and other items as per the discussions during the last 2 days.
Good idea, because we have a member of our board Badiam Karzil was one of the very first people, together with Mireille Abi Nasr, to build this institute together. So what are some of the benchmarks that you think we should be thinking about in promoting the matter of human rights in this part of the world? Is this too big of a challenge, or is this a must for us to do, all of us?
Let me first emphasize on the idea of having this Beirut Institute Summit taking place in this particular country, Abu Dhabi, UAE, because we were really cautious about this event, as you know, Raghida, and we finally decided to make it in this particular place of the world. And surprisingly, you won it, and we won it all together. What can I say, and which is new for me, that kind of forum which promote the Arab world principles, crisis, new eras, gives us a new ideas, let's say on the legal system at least, that we can have our own regulation, our own governance as an institute that can promote a better way of thinking and open mind for the Arab world, that we cannot find it in other foreign, let's say, think tank, which are templates or any imported ideas. So this is one thing. The second one, to reply on to your question, I think that Beirut Institute for the Future has to benchmark on human rights, definitely, to still cover the political and economical issues, but there is new eras to be explored and to be developed.
Great. I definitely want to benefit from your advice for Beirut Institute, but I think we're going to go back right now to the wider thing of what we should do for the theme of the summit. I will take 2 points of views here. Danine, you want to go first? Go ahead. Introduce yourself so that for those who don't know
my name is Robert Danine. I'm from the United States.
From the Council on Foreign Relations.
I'm at the Council on Foreign Relations
in
Harvard University. And
introduce yourself.
I used to serve in the U.S. government for many years. I think we spent so much of this the last 2 days talking about all the unrest and tumult at the geostrategic level. And much of the debate, at least in my country, in the United States, when it comes to this part of the world is, what can we do, what can't we do, all the limitations. And yet, one area I think where it all connects, is around this issue of freedom and individual aspirations. I mean, the Arab uprisings, whatever term you want to call, were a manifestation of this yearning that we've seen from the region. Now, we know all the conditions that led to it, youth unemployment and underemployment, the youth bulge, environmental conditions, what have you. But all of these conditions that led to the uprisings, and my colleague Bob Blackwell said that historians will look back on the Arab Spring and the Arab uprisings as a failure. That may be true in the short term, but I think the very impulses that led to it still obtain. And it very well may be the case that we are going to see more and further manifestations of those conditions after, despite or in parallel to all the geostrategic issues that we've been seeing. And so unless we in the region and those of us who are friends of the region continue to address these issues, we're going to revisit them. I think we're going to revisit them anyway.
What to do? Just one thing, what to do?
I think it's very simple. I mean, when we in the United States reach a point where we have no great policy prescriptions, there's no great geostrategic interventions to be had, either political or what have you, then at a minimum, there are two things we can do. One is stand up for the principles to which we stand for, that which makes us, I believe, an exceptional country, the country that people come to for ideals and not out of genetic or tribal affiliation. And secondly, stand up for our friends in this part of the world and those people who share those values.
We're going to get into that part once we sort of go to the middle of this front, and then I would take from the other part of the circle. I have a quick two fingers here because I want to go back to the president, to the minister, and then I come to you. Please go ahead. Again, introduce yourself, Butch.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here. Congratulations for this great success. My name is Vuk Jeremic. I served in the Serbian government for a number of years, and then I was elected 3 years ago president of the UN General Assembly. I come from a part of the world that is also divided by history. Pretty complex place, perhaps not as intractable as the Middle East, but no Switzerland either. And we fought a bloody war in the last decade, which came to an end when the international community, together with the parties, came together and finally put an end to this bloody mess that took about 200,000 lives in 4 years of fighting. So what we currently have, and pardon me for, perhaps being a little naive, we see this, especially with the latest Russian moves, I think it's becoming increasingly difficult to argue that victory over Assad is within reach. And I also don't think that it's making the defeat of ISIS that more imminent either. So the ongoing tragedy in Syria, terror is on the rise today in Turkey, tomorrow perhaps in Russia or in Europe, that is already being shaken by the influx of the refugees. And today we heard our Russian colleagues, but also Phil Gordon was speaking about the need to come and talk and to come to some kind of a Geneva 3. And there is going to be Geneva 3, I think. My question is when, and why not sooner rather than later? Why not 50,000? Why not now and not when 50,000 more people die? I think that's the only way forward. But I think it also needs to be coupled with, on one side, a very credible threat to act far more decisively than so far in case the solution is not there, but also with a vision of the Middle East. And some of the speakers today, particularly the youth, were much more eloquent than I could ever be when it comes to that future.
Thanks, Vuk. Vitaly, you know that this session is going to come to you in multiple ways because you've heard a lot. You're the only Russian here. And it's not my fault. It's not our fault. We invited many of you, and they said, you're the man. So, there's a lot of misgivings in this region about Russia's role. Quite honestly, I'm sure you feel it. I don't know if you feel bad about it or you feel strong. I heard you make the arguments. I heard you say I think to Elliot Abrams, he said that you said to him, you did recognize that regime in Damascus when you voted for that Security Council resolution on the chemical weapons. And you're right. You're totally right. The legitimization of the regime was then. So I don't know if this was a mistake or not, or maybe you will tell me what you think about that. But from this region, there are many questions to you. Why would you want to ally yourself with a regime that is seen by this region as a cause of problems towards their own people, towards his own people, the people of Syria, and beyond. Why would you want to look like you are part of the civil war and fight with the troops on the ground that are allied with the regime practically and against the, or de facto against the opposition? Why would you want to do that? What's in it for you?
Thank you, Raghida. I believe that we are not allied with this regime. We have a lot of other regimes with whom we work and we cooperate very closely. Just one example is Egypt, where we've been working with all governments, all regimes that were there, starting from Mubarak, then with Morsi, with the Muslim Brotherhood, and now with Sisi, which is a very constructive cooperation, very deep relationship, which is historic. The same about Syria. Unfortunately, the main three states, the pillars, probably there are 4 pillars of the Arab world, and sorry for the others, but always historically, Egypt, Iraq, and Syria were mostly, they were symbolizing the Arab heritage. Now all 3 are suffering from a lot of problems, So we have all historic relationships with all these 3 states, and with Saudi Arabia, because we were the first ones who recognized the Saudi state, by the way. So we have historic relationship with many partners in the Middle East, and it's not correct that we're allied with this regime. The philosophy of our government, I'm not representing government, by the way. The philosophy is that we support states.
Let's establish that you are definitely not an official spokesman, but you are very influential and very close to the government. So just for explaining.
So I'm expressing my understanding of our philosophy and philosophy of President Putin, that we're against regime change from abroad. We're in favor of supporting the status quo. We're against revisionism. We're in favor of, supporting those legitimate governments, but not directly appraising or, idealizing what these governments are doing.
How many people agree with Vitaly on this point? Just raise your hands. That it is really what he said. It's supporting a legitimate government. Who says, anybody objects to that? Anybody feels, or nobody is going to raise their hands? Okay, I guess nobody's going to raise their hands. Okay, no problem. We'll get into it.
That's good.
No, you're not off the hook yet. Hold on. Actually, Salman, you go ahead, and then I want you, Michael, to come in on this.
Vitaly, you and I have spoken many times. I've been to Moscow, especially because of the Syrian crisis. You know that there are other ways in which to achieve even Moscow's interests when it comes to Syria than starting and accelerating a global jihad, as now will be the case. The intervention of Russia is likely to intensify this conflict. We all know that because Bashar al-Assad was about to go down. But we also know, and you know this, that the armed factions that you are now bombing right now were willing to sit down with Russia. They were willing to discuss interests. They were willing to safeguard the port. They were willing to give some guarantees that it's not just going to be an narrow Islamist-led government, that there is a broader spectrum of Syrians. And this is something that you heard, something that we discussed. And yet, Moscow still went in. People are beginning to wonder whether it is really just about Syria and saving Bashar, whether it's not about a broader geopolitical goal, deflecting Ukraine, and also, frankly, because you can, kicking the United States out of this part of the Middle East.
Go ahead, Vitaly.
Very short remark. I think that in several hours, President Putin is going to be interviewed. So he was interviewed, but it will be on air by Russia 24. And he will say that the main goal of this Russian operation is to create favorable conditions for political settlement. I think it's an important statement. You can buy it or not, but it's an important statement. And the second thing, which will be in this interview, as far as I know, is that he will say that we are not going to be involved in sectarian struggle within the states of the Middle East, including Syria.
But in fact, some people feel that you are already involved, actually, by the very alliance with Iran in Syria, and of course, you know, Hezbollah bluntly fights in Syria with Iran and the regime. So the facts are on the ground, nobody is denying them. But I'm going to let Michael come in on this, and then you could answer if you want to. Michael, it's the first time you speak. Introduce yourself, please.
Sure. I'm Mike Singh. I'm the managing director of the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, and I was the senior director for Middle East Affairs at the White House from 2005 to 2008. Look, I don't think there's any mystery about what Russia is doing in Syria. I agree with Salman. I think the mystery is, where are we? Where are all of us in this picture? I mean, the Russians, just like the Iranians and just like ISIS, are stepping into a vacuum. What created that vacuum? I think it's the result of a breakdown of states in the region, but also a breakdown of the regional security architecture in the region. And so you asked, Raghida, what should we do? In the short term, we have to combat Iranian activities, combat ISIS relentlessly, I think far more firmly and resolutely than we are now. And I think that's a project not just for the United States, it's a project for the United States and our allies in the region, and it should be something that, frankly, the Russians help with, but I don't think they will. But in the long term, we have to have a strategy which goes beyond this. We have to have a strategy for addressing that breakdown that I mentioned. And I think it's been recognized by many speakers throughout the course of many panels that these things are connected. We have to strengthen states and strengthen the people of those states in the region through steps like structural economic reforms, strengthening civil society in these states. And these are things where the international community and the friends of the Arab world are ready to help. We also, though, need to strengthen the regional security architecture, because I think what we've seen over the past few years is that the states of the region are in some cases ready to act, but I think that we can boost the capacity of our alliance to act as an alliance, both diplomatically, militarily, and economically. There's very few effective regional security institutions in this region compared to other regions. There's very little intra-regional trade and investment. And I think that if we were to create these types of institutions and frameworks, this would be a method by which outside powers like China and Russia and even Iran could engage with us, but as a united front of allies. So there's a short term, there's a long term. We have a lot of work to do together.
I'm going to take, exceptionally, I'm going to take another intervention, second one, before I hear from others, because Mohammed Alim will have to catch a plane, and he needs to make a point on this point. So please, Mohammed.
Thank you, Raghida. Mr. Vitali, we just have to, we cannot engage in a real discussion if we don't agree on certain principles. And we have to say the truth about what is done in Syria. It is unacceptable to consider any government in the world that is killing its own citizens as a legitimate government. It goes against everything. Not that the other part is not as deadly and probably more, but we don't call them legitimate people. And that is extremely important. I think what has been missing also in part of the discussions, and that would be maybe a start of a recommendation, is the fact that the Arab world has not properly taken its own destiny in hand, other than the internal part, but in speaking to Russia, to the US. US position today is asked to understand the real problems inside and see where is the interest of the US. Is it in something that we are seeing? Where is the interest of Russia? Is this region vowed to be the only place on this planet where people can actually finish what they have unfinished somewhere else? That's a big question.
Yeah,
who's going to represent this?
Yeah, I'm sorry if I may differ with you a little bit to say that there has been reaching out to Russia. There's been several trips by Gulf states, including the United Arab Emirates, including, I think, a trip right now currently taking place, if I have not caught up with. But, I mean, there's a lot going on in reaching out to Russia, and the point is, I mean, they really go to Russia with hoping that they will change their minds, and then suddenly we're back to, I mean, again, you don't want to call it escalation, you don't want to call it intervention. Let's just call it, it was met by an increased military role of Russia in Syria after the appeal, or after the, you know, everybody went to Moscow trying to fix that relationship. Osman Sultan, please take the floor, and then at one point I'm going to come into the middle of this group, and if you don't mind, I'll come to you, but go ahead.
With your permission, and for the sake of being out of the box, I want to imagine a situation. When you called us, an emergency in the situation room, coming, I bumped my head, and I became completely struck with amnesia. So I forgot all this, and I am supposed to sit at the head of this table where all the situation room is working on the situation. I remember, though, two things. One, a little funny movie that my son showed me, showing a Coast Guard in one of the Arab worlds, hearing an SOS message. We are sinking, we are sinking. And then he said, yes, what are you thinking about? And that creates panic, because while we are hearing SOS messages, we are sinking, what are we thinking about? So that's something I'm hearing. So I sit and I hear a lot of, because I forgot all my expertise or my background, and there are so I sit really very shy, because a lot of experts are there. And then at some point, at the head of the table, I asked, gentlemen, what can we do to stop the bloodshed?
Please, ladies and gentlemen, please.
What can we do to stop the bloodshed? And they tell me, nothing can be done. And I tell them, try harder, please. Figure out a way. Shout to the world. So if there is nothing, then maybe we need to start thinking of the missing link of the people outside the situation room that have lost completely track of the discussion and the conversation.
No, that we have not lost track at all. We are really...
No, not us.
No, we are really trying to probe. I mean, of course, you always have got to look at what's going on in order to be provoked to think of how to fix it.
Let me, Raghida, please continue.
Yeah, but not for too long. You know,
no,
nobody's getting
2 minutes.
along. Yeah.
2 minutes.
Yeah. Not 2 minutes. One.
Once everybody told me, yes, maybe there is a solution. By miracle, they have a magic stick, and we stop the bloodshed, or we reach a situation of statu quo. My naive question would be, is it sustainable? And they will tell me, no. And I'll ask, why? Because we haven't looked. Because until, yes, we have to work on civil society. Yes, we work on economic reform. But until we figure out how to transform the logic of clanic belonging to a logic of belonging to a development momentum, which is not happening, nothing will happen. We will create all these ground, but then it will be disrupted by violence, because you said it, the Yazidis and the Ismaili and the Kurds and the Sunni and the Shia.
Yeah, but I wanna just stay a bit with Russia and the Arab world, and then the US and the Arab region, just because I want to just conclude it and move on. And move on.
I was amnesic.
Yeah, I just want to get somewhere with that, and then move on to Libya. For example, we have the Libyan foreign minister with us. We have several. What, you're going to come in on Russia or Iran? Yeah, but very quickly, because I'm going to give the floor to others for first intervention.
I think it's very difficult to imagine that Russia would have been involved in that level in Syria if there was not a nuclear deal between Iran and P5+1. I think this nuclear deal is not going also to dramatically change Iran's behavior in the region, but also it would change the behavior of many other countries, including Russia. So I have no answer. I just want to raise a question: to what extent United States, Western countries, and Arab governments in the region are ready for various not pleasant scenarios which would take place after the nuclear deal in the region.
Abdul Khaliq, but maybe you're an expert on this relationship, Iran, Russia, the Arab region. Can you tell me from your point of view, again, just try to help me out with, here's one idea of how to fix it. Give me, this is again the situation room, and you're just giving an advice of what to do to make it work, or just you could tell me it is hopeless. Just tell me what to do about this relationship with Russia.
Could you repeat your question again? And
no, there is no question. It's a discussion. It's a discussion. It's a discussion.
Okay. What was it?
If you're not ready, we'll continue.
I'm ready. I'm ready. It's just
we've been talking to Vitaly about, here we have a situation, people in this region are uncomfortable with your policies. And we have some Iranian experts that we are trying to understand from them, is there something that we can do to make it better, or they can do to make this situation better? Because it's not a good situation. Do you have a thought on that? Quick thought on that, like everybody else. Quick.
I totally, maybe you should handle this instead.
Would you like to say something? Because I'm just going to pass through.
I'm going to talk in Arabic, please. Those whom they want لا راغدة، يعني العالم كله طور مقاييس لبناء القوة، سواء كانت قوة عظمى أو قوة إقليمية مثل إيران. بمعنى أن إيران أعادت تعريف القوة ومتغيراتها، وبناء عليه بنت مشروعها الجيوستراتيجي على أن لكي تكون القوة المهيمنة في هذه المنطقة هناك شقين: شق عسكري وهو بناء برنامج نووي عسكري، تطوير قوات أو قدرات نووية. الشق الآخر هو إضعاف الجوار عن طريق التدخل في تهميشه باستخدام الورقة المذهبية، وهذه كانت واضحة في العراق. يعني حزب الله قبل 2000 لم يكن له أي ثقل في لبنان قبل أن تستثمر فيه إيران، وكذلك حزب الدعوة في العراق قبل أن تستثمر فيه إيران، وقيسي على ذلك في سوريا. العرب يعني من سنة 2000 إيران بدأت تطور هذا المشروع. العرب لكي يستطيعوا أن يقاوموا المشاريع الدولية، المشاريع الإقليمية، يجب أن يكون لديهم مشروع، يجب أن يكون لديهم نموذج لبناء القوة. نحن فيه، وهذا أطرح أيضا للتشارك في تجربتنا، وأيضا نسمع رأيهم. في مركز الإمارات للسياسات وعينا هذه الحقيقة، وعملنا درسنا كل نماذج القوة التي انعملت في العالم. طورنا مشروع أسميناه أطلس التحولات الدولية والإقليمية واستشراف المستقبلات البديلة لدولة الإمارات. يعني إذا ما استطعت أن تفهمي كيف تسير المسارات الدولية لن تستطيع أن تتنبئي. يعني لو إحنا عندنا هذا المؤشر كنا سنتنبأ بمسار إيران، مسار تركيا، مسار روسيا. دائما نحن نتعامل مع الأمور بردات الفعل وكأنها تحدث ويملكنا عنصر المفاجأة ثم لا نعرف ماذا
لا. السؤال هو حقيقة إذا نرجع له let me go back into English. The idea is really again if there is something, I mean, for example, are the Gulf states doing the right thing by going to Moscow and saying, we are going to tolerate it, it doesn't matter, we agree on many other things, we disagree on Syria, we disagree on Iran, but let's build this relationship together at any rate. Is this the right approach, or should they just say, as long as you are doing what you're doing in Syria
مش صحيح.
and
مش
Iran?
صحيح هذا الكلام.
You know, which is the right approach? Is it?
لا، أنا ممكن أتكلم عن الإمارات، يعني أنا ما أستطيع أتكلم عن السعودية، لكن أفهم أن الإمارات بدأت تعي أن المسألة ما هي حب وكره في العلاقات الدولية، ولكن مصالح، وبالتالي قد تكون لي مصلحة مع الولايات المتحدة، وأيضا لا يعني أني أنا ما تكون لي مصلحة مع روسيا. لكن ما بعد بشار الأسد، أنا هذا أفهمه، أن الإمارات لا تريد أن من يملأ الفراغ هي جماعات متطرفة، وأعتقد أنها تتفق مع موسكو في هذا. لكن قد يكون هناك، وهذا قد يكون هناك خلاف سعودي مع موسكو ما البديل للأسد. قد يكون هناك محاولة للتفاهم مع موسكو المرحلة الانتقالية ومن سيخلف الأسد، بحيث من يحقق مصلحة من، موسكو، إيران أو العرب.
بسرعة محمد دحلان، مالك دحلان، عفوا تفضل، عدم مؤاخذة. بعتذر لك
بسم الله
مالك.
الرحمن الرحيم. والحقيقة نعزي
Do
الإمارات.
you want to stay in Arabic or in English?
I'll switch to English in 1 second if you will allow me.
But please again
يعني
sharp.
يعني نعزي أولا الإخوان في الإمارات على الشهداء في التحالف، هذا سمتهم يعني حكومة وشعبا. وفي رأيي أنا عندي طرح مختلف تماما الحقيقة بالنسبة للاندماج أو النظرة الجيوسياسية. أهم مبدأ يجب علينا النظر فيه الآن هو مبدأ التكامل الإقليمي في الجزيرة العربية، حتى نترك الخليج، خلينا من الماء ننتقل من الماء إلى اليابس. أساس الآن الوضع الحالي في الجزيرة العربية يجب لا ننسى أن أهم موروث لنا ليس الموروث الثروة المعدنية والبترولية، وإنما هو الحرمين، وعلى أساسه يتم عملية الحركات التكفيرية والإرهابية وما إلى ذلك. فإن لم ننظر أن هذه المسؤولية مسؤولية جماعية في الجزيرة العربية، وهي التي تشرعن جميع الأنظمة، ليس على أساس الديمقراطية، لا، لكن على أساس سيادة القانون، وإن كانت أنظمة بطبيعتها ليست ديمقراطية. هذا المقصد الشرعي مبناه السياسة الشرعية. الآن بالنسبة لنا ننتقل من هذه النقطة إلى موضوع بسيط. And I will mention this in English if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Which is we have been completely isolated and forsaken by the United States. And we need to accept that. And that goes back to this point about territorial integrity. And I think at this stage, as we're bargaining for military armaments in the US, and we're trying to figure out, well, how much arms is Israel going to take so that Saudi can get more arms, I think this is the time where the region can benefit from a real win, which is to engage in serious peace talks with Israel using the Arab peace proposal. That, I think, is a fundamental issue. Finally, I'll just state the issue which we talked about earlier, which is مبدأ يعني العدالة بين الأجيال, which is intergenerational equity, which we really need to benefit from. Finally, I'll make one recommendation, which I think is missing. This is from my vantage point as a member of the board of the International Mediation Institute in The Hague. We are lacking leadership, Arab, Islamic ones, perhaps, but not in the sense of leadership to rule, but leadership to resolve disputes. I have all the love in the world for Sayyid Lakhdar Ibrahimi, but he's not in the health he's in right now, the Mistura, others. I think we would benefit from having personalities like Sayyid Amr Musa, His Highness Al-Amir Turki, Barham Saleh, individuals who can actually get in with some support with the UN to get involved with, to mediate some of these disputes.
All three distinguished board members of Beirut Institute, and as a
that's Beirut Institute's role now.
Inshallah. Ma'ali Wazir, again, what is it that you'd like us to walk away with? You know, your country is in lots of trouble these days. What is it that you'd like us to think about and do? Is Libya... Can we help save Libya if we do what?
Okay, before answering directly your question, allow me to say that I used to work for the Arab League for 12 years in Geneva. So I would like to, from the outset, to have two proposals.
Please.
One, because Libya is part of the Arab world and from the MENA region, as we all know. The first proposal doesn't relate to Syria nor Iraq. I have heard a lot about Syria today and Iran, Iraq. I love the Syrian people. They are great people. I worked for 4 years in Syria, and they know how brave, how courageous, how wonderful these creative people they are. However, one must not overcome the issue, the fundamental issue, that we have other serious situations in the Arab world.
And that's why I turned to you to talk about Libya. So it's really
so
an
before Libya, I would
issue.
like to say I have one proposal, that there should be a Marshall Plan for these countries, Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt, and Tunisia.
Actually, you're going to be pleased. I will give you a sort of heads up about the declaration that I'll be reading on behalf.
I haven't read it.
No, we do have something. We don't call it Marshall Plan at all, but it is very much in the same thinking that you have, and it's going to please you, I hope.
Yeah, it's going to please me because I am very thrilled by the Sweden award to Tunisia of the prize of the Nobel Prize yesterday. But one has not to forget Tunisia on the map. Tunisia is the initiator of the so-called Arab Spring, and I would like to disagree and not to subscribe to what has been said. I heard it this morning that the Arab Spring has failed. I think it's too soon. Let us go back to the former Eastern European states. They had some way to go after decades of dictatorial regimes. So I think we should give time to time before saying that. The second proposal at the macro level is to support a credible and reputable organization, which is the Azhar in Egypt. Al-Azhar can do a lot, because, as I said this morning, it teaches the Shiite way of reading of Islam. It doesn't have any sectarian reading of Islam, and it has a lead role in the Arab world, whether it's Sunni, Muslim world, whether it's Sunni or Shiite. So I think we missed the boat. Gaddafi spent a lot of money in Africa and elsewhere through a so-called Islamic organization. He spent his money to initiate and trigger military coups, rather than assisting such an organization that has started, as I said, and we should be financially and politically supporting Al-Azhar alongside Al-Zaytuna in Tunisia, alongside Al-Alawiyin in Morocco. So this is my policy proposal for you.
We will reflect it when we do our summary. We will definitely reflect that.
And I wouldn't like to miss Libya. I think we should, as our friend from the Human Rights Watch in Lebanon, and he's a board member of the Beirut Institute, I think the rule of law and the observance of legitimacy should be at the heart of our concerns when it comes to Yemen and when it comes to Libya. The international community dragged its feet. It adopted the UN Security Council Resolution 2174. It provided for soft sanctions such as ban on travel and freeze of assets. And as we speak, it hasn't managed to implement those sanctions because there has been an assertion that we should wait for the peace process to mature and not to sanction those who can be on board. The result of the peace process that has prevailed in Libya as we speak is not conclusive in this respect. The GNC hardliners are still there. They're blocking. They are a stumbling block on the way of getting it concluded. So, as I said this morning, we are not yet there, but we are nearly there with those brave Libyans who believe in democracy and state grounded in the rule of law in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. I just want to really, in case I don't get to thank you in a different forum, I just want to really thank you for being here throughout this summit, from the very beginning till the very end. And you are a sitting minister, and giving us all this, your time and all your wisdom. I really, Akh Muhammad, I appreciate it. سمو الأمير.
منذ الحرب العالمية الثانية ومنطقتنا تعاني من مرض اسمه إدارة الأزمات وليس علاجها، بالإنجليزي crisis management-itis وليس crisis resolution. وبالتالي إذا نظرنا من القضية الفلسطينية إلى ما يحدث الآن في سوريا والعراق، لم تنجز أي مهمة بكامل جوانبها وملابساتها. ولذلك أعتقد ما يحدث الآن بالنسبة لعاصفة الحزم هو أننا بدأنا في المنطقة نفكر بأننا نحن يجب أن نعالج أمراضنا ولا نعتمد على الآخرين إلا إذا استطعنا أن نكسب تأييدهم، بس يكون القرار من عندنا ويكون المبادرة من عندنا. هذا من ناحية. من ناحية ثانية بالنسبة لإيران، أمرين يجمعون مع إيران: الجغرافيا، ولا يمكن أننا نغير الجغرافيا. أحيانا وأنا نايم أحلم أن الجزيرة العربية نستطيع أن نفتقها من قارة آسيا ونبحر في البحار ثم نرسو في مكان بجانب السويد والنرويج ومثل هذه الدول، ليس فقط لنتمتع بالسلم والأمان، وإنما أيضا لنتمتع بالجو الحلو الذي لا نتمتع به عندنا في الجزيرة العربية. ولكن للأسف الجغرافيا تحكم علينا أن نبقى بجوار هذه المناطق الساخنة التي هي تستنزف ليس فقط الإمكانيات المادية في منطقتنا، وإنما أكثر من ذلك وأهم من ذلك الأرواح. مثل ما تفضل صديقي، متى نستطيع نقول كفى للقتل الذي يحدث في منطقتنا؟ هذا الأمر هو الذي نعاني منه في إدارة الأزمات، لأن هذه الأزمات باستمرارها يستمر نزف الدماء وقتل الشهداء. وأرجو من الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يوفقنا في أن نصل إلى الوقت الذي نستطيع أن ننهي هذه الأزمات. الشيء الثاني اللي يجمعنا مع إيران وهو في عدة أمور: إيمان بالله سبحانه وتعالى، إيمان بالقرآن الكريم أنه كتاب الله سبحانه وتعالى، وإيمان بأن سيدنا محمد هو نبينا ورسولنا الذي أرسله الله سبحانه وتعالى لكي يجمعنا وليس لكي يفرقنا. إذا استطعنا أن نركز على هذا الشيء اللي هو يجمعنا مع إيران من الطرفين، فسنستطيع أن نتغلب على الفوارق التي هي تبعدنا عن بعض، إن كان مذهبيا أو عقائديا أو حتى سلوكيا. ومن الفوارق فيما يقال الآن من قبل بعض من لا يجد فرصة إلا ويتهم إيران بأنها تستعدي العرب وتحاول أن تفرض نفسها على العرب، ولا شك أن تدخلاتها في الدول العربية تثير هذه المقولات وهذه المخاوف. لكن دائما أذكر زملائي من العرب ثم من أعرفهم من الإيرانيين. من الذي يحكم إيران الآن؟ السيد خامنئي. السيد خامنئي ذو العمامة السوداء التي تعني أنه سليل سيدنا محمد. فهناك دم عربي يحكم إيران. فكيف نقول أن إيران بطبيعتها، لأنها إيران، لأنها فارسية، لأنها صفوية كما توصف وتنعت، أنها غرضها محو العروبة والثقافة العربية وغيرها. أضف إلى ذلك أن كتابة اللغة الإيرانية بأحرف عربية هذا أمر أيضا يجمعنا مع إيران، غير ما يتوفر من روابط تراثية وثقافية، وحتى أستطيع أن أقول روابط عائلية بين شطي الخليج. ولاحظوا لم أقل خليج فارسي ولا خليج عربي، لأنه معبر مائي. أننا ندخل في عراك على هل هذا المعبر هو فارسي ولا عربي، أعتقد أنه يكون دليل لصغر عقولنا في مثل هذا الأمر. فهناك ما يجمعنا مع إيران أكثر مما يفرقنا. وأرجو أن هذه القيادة التي هي تنتسب إلى أصول عربية في إيران أن تعي بأنها عندما تتدخل في شؤون الأمة العربية فهي تتسبب في إثارة النعوت وردة الفعل التي لا تنظر إلى ما يجمعنا مع إيران، بس تنظر إلى ما يفرقنا عنها. فهذا الأمر من الأمور التي هي من إدارة الأزمات. فإن كان أمكن أننا ننهي هذه الأزمة الآن فسيكون ذلك ليس فقط في مصلحتنا إحنا كعرب، ولكن أيضا في مصلحة الإيرانيين الساكنين في الشق الثاني من الخليج. ومؤسسة بيروت أو معهد بيروت أعتقد بجمع لنا في هذا اليوم وفي اليوم السابق استطاع أن يفرج عن ما في العقول وما في الصدور في أمور عدة، منها سوريا ومنها العراق، منها اليمن، منها إيران، منها دول مجلس التعاون وعلاقاتنا بالدول العظمى، إن كان روسيا، إن كان الولايات المتحدة أو أوروبا. وأكرر وأقول ما قلت أمس، أن مشكلتنا التاريخية والتقليدية والتي ستستمر لب المشاكل عندنا هي مشكلة فلسطين، والحل لها موجود. وكل الذي يبغى لنا نعمله أننا ننهي هذه الأزمة ولا نديرها. وشكرا للأخت راغدة على تفضلها.
شكرا جزيلا. شكرا جزيلا. يعني بعد بقدر I can go on. I'm supposed to go on for another hour, but I know you're tired. So can I just do 20 minutes and then we conclude? Is that okay with everybody? 5 minutes? 5 minutes? Excellent. That's good for me because I'm exhausted. How many shall we do? Just 5 minutes or 10 minutes? What? Anything? You want to say anything? Okay. Right. And I promised the floor to just take a couple of things from this part of the circle. So, like, really 30 seconds. They gave me 5 minutes, 30 seconds. Please, I need mics. Introduce yourself, please.
Thank you very much. I'm Mishari Naim. I'm Professor of Political Science at King Saud University, formerly. I now work as a political advisor to the Secretary General of the GCC. 1 minute. I'm speaking on my behalf. right now. Let me start. I'm referring now to the Syrian question and the Russian role. Now, let me start by commending, of course, the well-known Russian position toward Arab causes. On top of that, of course, the Palestinian question. We all, of course, appreciate and commend the Russian role. Now, having said that, of course, I have to express my displeasure with the increased participation of Russians in killing the Syrian people. I think they had enough killing all that. But having said that, now with Russia that might feel reassured about its interest and influence in Syria, it might now find itself in a position to contribute positively to the resolution of the Syrian crisis. I think now it boils down to being a question of one man being removed. And I think Russia can play a constructive role in this.
Okay, so a question to you, Vitaly, because you're going to have to answer at the very end. Mr. Minister, please forgive me a quick minute, please. Mr.
I have one question to my friends from Iran originally, the Iranians. For how long do you think Iran will continue the policy it has been pursuing in Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen? My second point is related to Beirut Institute. I commend all the work you have done, but we should not stop at the 2 days work. As I have suggested during my discussion in the policy corners yesterday, we have to liaise with other private sector and civil society in the Arab world. And there is a wealth of information which we can get. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Minister. I want to give the floor to, please can you come here for a minute? You two have spoken when you were on the stage. You two have spoken about the storytelling, and one of you gave an example that there is, I think you said that you gave the example of the movies that are done and that you want people to come and tell you their stories. Jihan or Karim, who speaks about that? Quickly, please.
Thank you,
Raghida,
for giving us...
How can we do this? How can we help you?
Yeah, I mean, basically, we flew here from LA. Currently in the United States, most people, the first time they hear about Islam, they learn about it on CNN and they see a terrorist. So we're trying to challenge this image of a terrorist as the only image of Islam, as the only image of the Arab world. And we're starting backwards. So we have a lot of catch-up to do from the storytelling side. And part of the problem we've identified is there is no authentic authors coming who are telling the story. Our story is being told for us to the world. And the Daeshs of the world help propel this message. So what we're trying to propose is we are putting together the first scripted television series that will be that has major interest from the top U.S. broadcasters like HBO and Netflix, that will tell the last 14 years of the war on terror, but from the Middle Eastern perspective. And we want to open up a platform for all of you in this room to speak to us confidentially, who feel that you have a perspective or story that should be told in this dramatic narrative. And I tell you, this is, television is the most powerful medium in the world, and it is a very rich medium. And I think it's about time that we start to take a stake and interest in this medium. There are many shows that are like Homeland and Tyrant that come out that have one particular message and are also fed by certain institutes in DC that propel a certain perpetual message of the Middle East. So I just want to commend that. And one last thing I just wanted to say, I know it's late, but in terms of one response to the questions, the Arab Spring is not dead. The people, the youth said, "Al-Sha'b yurid isqat al-nizam." The people demand the downfall of the regime. I think it's important to remember why people said this. Why did people demand this battle cry? And let's provide institutions to protect this from happening. Okay. And the last thing is for the gentleman who said, just one second, regional security infrastructure, security. If we want security, invest in the young people, invest in people. That's the way to security. Don't invest in weapons. They're not going to protect us.
Great. So Can you hear me? Okay. So, because we heard from the youth at the end, so with the permission of everyone on stage, let this be the last word in this town hall that was supposed to be 2 hours, and I cut it down to 1 hour plus a little bit. And if you don't mind, I would like to conclude with reading the declaration that we have decided to have for Beirut Institute. I do have a copy in Arabic. I will not read it in Arabic because, quite honestly, I'm a bit of a control freak and I did not review it in Arabic. So I'm afraid to read something publicly which I have not taken a look at. Before I forget, I want to thank our knowledge partner, Etikani, for having sat through the policy circles and decided and distilled actually quite a lot of creative ideas and interesting ideas that came out of the 4 groups that we will be working on bringing to you later. Before the declaration, once again, Beirut Institute is about its board members and members of the advisory committee, and I just want to thank you for having given all your energy all this time and for being here all this time. And I really, I'm so proud. We have 4 of the board members, Badiam Karzil, Baraham Saleh, Amr Musa, Taban al-Amir Turki, and advisory members. We have Mireille here, and we have Asman Sultan. I don't know, who am I missing? Somebody else. But and again, before I forget, and because I'm afraid that if I read the declaration and walk away, then I may forget other people, but I'll try not to. Again, the co-chairs, one of the co-chairs, as you know, very active one, is Khalid Janahi, who's been here throughout the whole summit. I just can't forget to thank 2 incredibly amazing young people. I can't, and you all know them. And you'd probably say, oh God, thank God I dealt with them, not with you. Janine Kunjian and Mario Canaan, please stand up, please. Thank you so much. Without you, I couldn't have done that. Thank you so much. I will read the declaration, and then let's see how we decide to take it from there in terms of how to follow up on the minister's suggestion. So this is the Beirut Institute Summit of 2015, and this is the Beirut Institute Summit Declaration from Abu Dhabi. And of course, as you know, we met under the title Reconfiguring the Arab Region and its Global Space Beyond Political Economy and Security Threats. At this very first Beirut Institute Summit, we have started a conversation that will continue in the years to come. This inaugural discussion has been defined by a commitment to bringing non-traditional thinking to the most important challenges we are facing. Our conversation yielded a wide range of specific recommendations that we will distill and deliver to policymakers at a later stage. That document will reflect the rich, off-the-record discussions that took place in our close policy circles, as well as the insights from our fascinating public discussions. While the following is by no means a comprehensive agreed summary of our findings, it provides a sense of the range of specific actions that we discussed. Specifically, our discussion included consideration of the following potential actions. Decisive multilateral action to bring end to the current conflict in Syria. This effort should include 1. Placement of a multilateral peacekeeping force to create military space for all subsequent political and economic actions to succeed. 2. Immediate action to address the humanitarian crisis, including specific and increased assistance to the refugees and the establishment of humanitarian safe zones. 3. Creation of a legitimate vision for post-conflict Syria underwritten by a GCC fund to support the critical need to rebuild infrastructure, social services, and the critical elements of the state that have been destroyed by the years of conflict. And this sort of fund that's suggested goes beyond Syria, Mr. Minister. It will be reflected that it's for the crises in the different parts of the region, from Yemen to Libya to Lebanon and otherwise. The second major recommendation is to re-intensify efforts to resolve the question of Palestine on the basis of a 2-state solution. This is a critical first step in creating a positive cycle of change in the region. This effort should include a joint peace treaty between Israel on the one hand and Syria, Lebanon, and Palestine on the other. Then we have the recommendation to accelerate our efforts to strengthen intra-Arab relations, moving beyond the traditional impediments to our collaboration to deepen our economic, social, and cultural relationships, including through necessary reforms. We also say we call for rapidly drive progress to a new regional order. We want to rapidly drive progress to a new regional order that will allow us to deal with the diverse challenges that face us, including state terrorism, non-state terrorism, the refugee crisis and economic dislocation, and the need for economic diversification. This effort must include exploration of renewed, strengthened regional institutions, including political, security, and economic organizations modeled on the most successful examples from around the world, such as ASEAN and APEC. Comprehensively drive regional economic growth through an integrated plan, including 1, a new anticipatory GCC-centered regional fund I will try that again. I guess I'm tired. A new anticipatory GCC-centered regional fund to begin building the future now. 2, driving deep economic integration through an agreement that minimizes the barriers to intra-regional trade. 3, intensively drive economic inclusion of the Arab youth through new technology-enabled approaches to job creation and entrepreneurship. 4, driving education and apprenticeship to maximize the employability of graduates in the new digital economy. And 6, I think it was, leverage technology to leapfrog gaps in traditional infrastructure wherever possible. And under the title to strengthen regional governance and the rule of law, including through efforts on the following fronts, and they are: empower women as crucial economic, political, and social leaders and as natural agents against extremism. 2, advance inclusive political systems that provide for full participation of all segments of society. 3, bring the private sector deeply into policy deliberations as a key partner. 4, increase the levels of real accountability in the region, progress against corruption, and encouraging wider Arab membership in the ICC, International Criminal Court. And finally, establish a new institute to train Arabic-speaking psychological professionals who can address the future costs of the traumas the region is undergoing today. These are some of your thoughts that are reflected here, obviously. We will indulge more into reading through what you have said. Abdullah, I'm sorry, I missed saying that you are on the advisory board, and so I want to recognize your good efforts as well. I hope I didn't miss anybody else. And I think there is only one thing to say, that you have, Yes?
And recognize the amazing work that the lady Raghida Dergham has done by bringing us together. Really, thank you, Raghida. You are unique.
Thank you. Thanks to you. So then, thank you. Oh, thank you. For this, I must then on this note, let me, with the permission of Prince Turki, with the permission of you members of the board, then let me declare, since this was okay, let me declare that, God willing, Beirut Institute Summit Edition 2 will be held in 2016 at a specific date to be announced later, at a place to be announced later, because this is an institute for the Arab region and beyond, and we will make a surprise as good as this one. Thank you for being here. Thank you.